And for you who is watching us tonight, it is an important discussion for you because this is going to inform how we are going to better manage our population and also benefit from some of the developmental issues that we are putting in place as a country. So do join us and continue interacting with us at KBC Channel 1. Use the hashtag Sunday Express as we discuss population and development. And joining me to have this very important conversation, I'm having Dr. Bernard Onyango. He's a senior researcher and policy analyst at the African Institute for Policy Development. Thank you for creating time.
Thank you, Serfine.
All right, so we are marking the World Population Day today, and we've just watched the story there by Ruth Wamboi that has really, sort of set the pace for this conversation. I'd like to start this conversation from just looking at the theme and what inspired this particular theme this time around. It centers around rights and choices are the answer. Whether baby boom or bust, the solution to shifting fertility rates lies in prioritizing all people's reproductive health and rights. Why is this important at this particular time?
Yeah, I think what's important, thinking about this from the perspective of rights and choices, is that we think the world has, over the decades, really moved away from a point where at one point several decades ago people talked about population control, but the conversation has changed because there's a realization that people need to be given the opportunity to make choices, right? But you equip them, you equip them with the right information, you equip them with the right tools to be able to manage their own family planning choices. And so that's where this really focuses on. And also partly over the last year, during now more than a year actually, during this COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen challenges around reproductive health. For example, we know that there were disruptions in supply of family planning products, for example, but there are other factors that also affected reproductive health. And therefore it's really just this idea that whether it's about when thinking about population growth and thinking about family planning and reproductive health, what we need to do is not to dictate what people need to do, what individuals need to do, what families need to do, but rather give them the information and the other tools, whether it's a family planning products, services, so that they're able to actually manage their own, decisions around how many children they would like to have.
I like how your response sort of empowers the person, sort of like gives them the power to be able to make these decisions and also to be able to, access some of these services, so that it's not a responsibility that is, placed at the top, but it's brought to the bottom level of the society. Let me just take you back to what you've alluded to concerning the COVID-19 and its impact on access to reproductive health services. I believe this is also forming a very big chunk of why this theme was coined. I don't know, how you'd interpret what impact this has been, and how long are we going to take as a country before we can actually come out of this particular, trend?
I mean, it's not easy to say for sure. I think we all have to realize that COVID-19 has had immediate impacts, but also it will have long-term impacts. One of the things, for example, if you think about the more immediate impacts, initially when when we had lockdowns, like strict lockdown and all that, people obviously were going to find it a bit more difficult to get to services. But you can also look at it from the aspect of where are resources going. So COVID-19 was and has been the health emergency we've had for the last one plus year, and obviously we know that resources therefore have been directed towards that. So we all
focused on COVID.
So I mean, this happens. This happens. Previously, we've seen this at some point. For example, in the late 90s and into the mid 2000s, because of HIV at that time being such a serious issue, it had an impact on the family planning program in Kenya, which had been going quite well in the 80s and say the early 90s. So these are realities that we have to grapple with. But you can also think about the other aspects. We know that schools were shut down for a very long period, and many people, well, we don't know the numbers yet exactly, but we know that there are definitely dropouts because of that long period of shutdown of schools. And so, for example, for the girls who dropped out, whether it's some in primary school or in secondary school, we know that by being out of school really expose them, for example, to early pregnancies or child pregnancies.
Does this explain the surge in teenage pregnancies during this particular time? Is it related to, the disruption of access to reproductive health services?
I think, more analysis has to be done exactly. We've done previously a bit of analysis on the numbers last year and early this year, and in some counties, the numbers are more or less at a similar level for a comparable period previously, but in other counties you see maybe there are more numbers, and obviously there's still more analysis going to be done, and that's why I'm saying that the longer term impacts of COVID-19 are not going to be apparent immediately, but we can see the direction.
Okay, looking forward to that. Bernard, let me take you to the numbers now, because we want to read in between these particular numbers, and projections from the United Nations, like we even showed in our story earlier, are that the world population is projected to reach 8.5 billion in 2030 and to increase further to 9.7 billion in 2050 and 11.2 billion by 2100. And according to the United Nations, once again, more than half of the global population growth between now and 2050 is expected to occur in Africa. I want to ask you two questions in this particular trend. What is unique about Africa to justify this projection? And secondly, also tell me, if you look at this particular trend and how the UN is actually predicting, if it takes shape this way, is it sustainable?
I think that's a very good question. There's no doubt that Africa is going to be contributing to most of the increase over the next few decades, and that's particularly because what we call the fertility rate, or the average number of children a woman has, is actually much higher in Africa than the rest of the world. If you look at the global average, it's about 2.5 children per woman. In Africa, it's about 4.4. If you look
that's quite high.
That's quite high. Kenya is just under 4, so it's really not there. There are quite a number of countries in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, that have higher fertility rates than Kenya. Probably the unique region in sub-Saharan Africa is Southern Africa, which has much lower fertility. So that's really, the main driver. The fertility levels in Africa are still high. I think people, when we talk about is it sustainable, what is important is to really look at, be able to look at these numbers, and start thinking ahead. How do we plan for the future? I think we shouldn't just go out of hand and say, it's not sustainable, so we need to control, and that's where the rights and choices come. So really, one, we have to say yes, at the rate that which we are growing, it's very fast. Between now and 2050, most countries in Africa are going to have their population double in size. Even if you look at Kenya, the last census, population growth rate of 2.2, that shows that within the next 30 years, will almost double. We may not necessarily double. And I just wanted to come back to the numbers that were estimates from the UN. I think I just wanted to make a slight correction in terms of what the UN projects our current population as, which is about what you said, about 55 million. Mm-hmm. But our last census was at 4.7. About 47.6 million, something mm-hmm. thereabouts. Mm-hmm. So I think, we want to, our figures at this point are a bit, I'd say, probably closer to what it is. And I don't think, it's not that the population has increased by 7 million. High. Yeah, so when we look at the last 10 years, probably it's been increasing, the numbers have been increasing, total population close to about 1 million a year, something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what we'll see. It will probably come down as fertility is coming down. So I guess between 2019 and now we are probably still hopefully
so the
under
UN
50
projection
million.
Of 55 million is not sinking.
Yeah, I mean the UN does these projections. Mm-hmm. What they do is that they use the data from the national data. Right. So there'll be a correction in the UN data once they factor in our last census, right. and they do make that correction over time.
All right, I want us to marry these two now. As you've rightfully put it, that we could just double our population as we continue in the next few years. Are we also looking at how we are going to really provide the necessities of this particular population? How is population related to development? Why is it important?
When just looking at the census itself, I think people we don't use it as well as we could have, because census really the population census should really be a planning tool. Definitely the ministry in charge of that, the planning department, they take those numbers very seriously, and those are some of the things they for example, you're able to project and say over the next 10 years this is how many kids we are going to have in secondary school, and therefore we need to start factoring in what we need to do for that. This is what also helps us think about our health needs. But I think that probably there is a limited group of people who are using this data, and thinking about Kenya now, really the county governments, for example, should really be able to understand what these numbers mean and how they, because we are implementing at county level.
So currently you say we are not taking advantage of these numbers, we are not using them in our planning?
No, we are using them. I mean, the government does use them. I'm just saying that probably we are not using them optimally, right. And especially at county level. And when you see, even in the media, for example, when we see the census numbers, it's always about which region has more voters. It's not just about voters. It's about thinking, because the importance about this population is that we need to know what we need to do in terms of human capital investments in education, in health, because you can have very many people, yeah. But if they are not educated, if they are not healthy, you're not optimizing, their talents, right?
All right. Yeah. All right. I want us to move very quickly. We are running out of time for this conversation, and I'd just like to understand, if you look at how our population is scattered in terms of where is the wealth, in whose hands, in terms of which age group is able to generate something for the economy. Do you think we are balanced? Do you think it's healthy for us, looking at the ones that are below 15, the ones that are above, say, 35? Are we healthy in that regard?
Yeah, so the population age structure is absolutely important to understand, and how it impacts on our development aspirations. So if you look at the last census again, actually 39% of that 47 million were under 15 years of age. 39%.
39%.
Another 36% were under 35. So altogether, what you're saying is at that time you have 75% of your population under 35, and so already when you're thinking about investing, where do you need to invest most? But also when you're thinking about the dependency burden, those under 15 are definitely dependent, and I mean our aspiration is that people are going to school until probably around age 18 and even going to college. So even that group, many of them are still dependent. And then we know from we know that youth young age unemployment at the younger ages, under 35, is actually quite high. So even those, there are many Kenyans who are age 30 who are dependent on their parents, and so this is a huge strain on the economy. And what we should be doing is, one, make sure we are investing in that younger age group to have the adequate education and skills to be able to be productive. And then for those young adults, to make sure that we have employment opportunities for them.
All right.
And so in that case, then you can say, yes, we have a young, vibrant population that is productive. But for Kenya and for many African countries at the moment, we are saying, yes, we have this very young population, but very many of them are dependent, and it's a huge strain on the economy.
Have we failed our young people? That's a question we need also to be asking ourselves going forward, which is coming out very strongly. Currently, we have about 27.8% of the population in the urban area. This is related to population and how fast it grows. I want you to talk about urbanization and population and whether we have hit it when it comes to planning for this population that is increasingly moving to the urban areas.
Yes, so I mean there are two things. One, there's a population that's moving from rural to urban areas, and we know, for example, in this country, right after high school, a lot of people move to Nairobi because that's where opportunities have been in the past. With this, with devolution, we thought that we are going to start seeing, but even that still it's happening. I mean, even in the counties, there's still a movement to the county headquarters. But the other thing is, already there's a large young population in Nairobi, who the young people are going to have families, so that also increases the number of people in urban areas.
What should inform the planning?
We should inform the planning, and we definitely, I mean, this is obvious that we haven't done a very good job in terms of really executing on urban planning to deal with this growth rate. And it's going to get much higher by 2050. Probably, we'll have more than half of the population living in urban centers. And so the question is, if you don't execute that, implementing your urban plan to take care of this population, then again you're not maximizing their potential, and their quality of life is not good. If people are living in informal settlement, their quality of life is not, it's not good, right? And so we could do better. We can definitely do better when it comes to urbanization.
Wow, unfortunately we've run out of time for this very important conversation, but as your parting shot, as we mark the World Population Day, what is that fundamental issue that you think we should put on this particular table as we discuss our population management going forward in the Kenyan context?
Yeah. So I think the key thing is just to think about, what are the investments we are making in our population so that we can maximize on the potential. Whatever we do at this point, even if we decide to have smaller families, I've told it 75% of the population is under 35. So whatever we do, our population is going to grow. Even if we decide now to have families, decide to have 1 or 2 kids, but because already there is this huge pool of young people and they'll have families, we can expect to see definitely over 60 million by 2050, probably over 70 million by 2050. We are going to hit over 70 million. The UN actually thinks closer to 90. It's usually a little bit, a little
Lower.
less than that. And so what's important is, what are we doing to invest in human capital development and opportunities for these people for them to be able to maximize their potential,
Okay.
and give a boost to the economic growth.
Okay. Dr. Bernard Onyango, thank you for coming and sharing your insights with us. He's a senior researcher and policy analyst at the African Institute for Policy Development. Tonight we were discussing population and development as the world is marking the World Population Day. Now you know the decision and the choices are in your hands. You have the power to decide. You seek the opportunities, you seek the services, make a decision about how many children you want to have. It will go a long way in informing so much in this particular society. We are just going to be taking a very short break right now.